Yeah, well, what about my $5?
Give me a couple of days.
A couple days.
Florence, can I have the French fries, gravy, and cherry coke?
I watch him who doesn't like fatty foods, I think.
Welcome back to the John Fredericks Show. That's the audio from the movie Diner. Our guest at this half hour was supposed to be Governor Barb Ehrlich. He may be a little late in calling in, so I just had that as a lead-in. Diner's from Baltimore. I think he's on the line now. Is he, Mike? Thank you so much. Good morning, Governor. Are you on the line?
Good morning, my friend.
Hey, Bob, good to speak to you. I don't know if you were listening. The lead-in for you, I had the audio from the movie Diner.
Perfect. I love it. Thank
you like
you.
It, huh?
I'm honored.
Yeah, hey, listen, you're blue-collar Bob. We have a blue-collar billionaire president-elect, and on the line with us, we got a blue-collar governor.
That's for sure.
Member of the House of Congress. I remember back in the days when you were congressman.
Yeah.
And from Arbutus, Maryland, a very blue-collar area outside of Baltimore. And I got a chance to meet you about a week or so ago at a Christmas party in Charles County that you attended with your lovely wife. By the way, I'm going to tell you something. We get older, but she gets younger. God almighty, she looks great.
It's scary.
It is.
I married a younger woman.
When you said Kendall was at the table, I looked. I says, "Is he kidding me? That's not her." But I had to take a double take, and I don't need glasses, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
Bob, by the way, thank you for coming on.
My
Today's
pleasure.
a very special day. It's the Electoral College. But
Yep.
I invited you on because you were speaking so great at that Christmas party. And I know you probably have this right, to roll right off the top of your head. I would like you to tell the John Fredericks Show listeners what you spoke about at the Christmas party in regards to what they're doing, the EPA, so on and so forth. If you don't mind, roll that off. This is Barb Ehrlich Unchained, let's put it that way. But tell us what it was you were talking about.
Well, the problem is it's really the new left unchained. And this is a speech, and I'll paraphrase it here, obviously, but it's a speech I first gave in the state of Maine almost a year ago, maybe 9-10 months ago. And it was the Maine State Party. I walked in this large arena, probably 3,000 people, and nobody knew who I was. If they did, they were real political junkies. But when I left after a 20-25-minute speech, I got a standing ovation because I think it's a different talk. It's not the normal "we're great, they stink," or "we're conservative, they're liberals" sort of thing. It's really what's at stake in the country today, not just in this election, but going forward. And the denominator here is speech and dissent. Some commentators have touched on this, but what my speech does is sort of connect the dots with regard to how expert the left is in, or at least the Obama left in this modern era has been in curtailing or attempting to curtail speech, using the levers of power available to a uber progressive president to limit us on the right. And so I just go through a series of examples with regard to how they've done it. I start with really the intense pressure from Democratic attorney generals around the country on corporate CEOs who have different views on climate change, for example. And then I go to pressure from Democratic senators, United States senators, directed to colleges and universities who employ professors who may have different views on climate change. Obviously, I go through a whole litany, the insanity, the absolute pseudo-intellectual insanity of what's going on campuses today in America with regard to speech codes and safe zones and trigger warnings, and all meant, obviously, to limit speech, to delegitimize speech on the right. Then I talk a little bit, obviously, about Lewis Lerner, the whole campaign at the IRS to limit the ability of conservative nonprofits to put their machinery together during a close presidential race 4 years ago, which was very successful. Nobody's heard of Fifth Amendment lowest since. I go through various other examples, but one is interesting that people really haven't heard about is these state initiatives meant to. And the genesis of these laws has been to protect people who give dollars to certain groups during the civil rights movement, the NAACP, for example. Mm-hmm. But now there's this movement afoot in the states, and some have passed, by the way, these state initiatives to have the contributors to nonprofits, their names placed in the public realm in order for folks on the left to find out who is writing, for example, checks to pro-marriage groups or tort reform groups, or you name the conservative cause or the cause on the right that the left wants names in order to put public pressure or bring public pressure against. So you start adding all this stuff up, and it's really fascinating what they've done over the past 8 years to perpetuate this movement. And after I go through a few more examples, I come to the bottom line, which is this is not liberalism that we're facing today. My friends who are liberals, 60s liberalism is part of the great American tradition of dissent, of protest, the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, the women's movement, Dr. King's great speeches. This was all about speech and the best parts of the American tradition of dissent and free speech. But today, it's not liberalism, it's progressivism. And progressivism is
it's a cancer.
Very dangerous.
It's a cancer.
And it seeks to limit speech. It seeks to limit dissent, and it's something we really have to pay attention to as Americans going forward.
Now, this speech that you gave, is it anywhere on your website or a website?
It's not. It's not. It's not even written. It's you saw I have basically 2 pages of notes.
Right.
But it's proven very, very popular around the country. I gave that speech in Florida and Tennessee over the last week to 10 days, and when people first hear it, they go, "Geez, this is serious." And I love the speech.
I dropped my fork. I was eating food. I dropped my fork. I said, well, I got to listen to this. And I looked at the girl on my right, and I said, "Are you listening to this?" I mean, Governor, and you've written a couple of books since you've been...
Yes, 3 books, yeah.
You've written 3 books, and one of your books, the latest book, was there. I did get a copy signed.
And it has some of this material in Turning Point, by the way. And Turning Point's done very well, my 3rd book. But I really wanted to chronicle the not just the legacy, but the record of 8 years of progressivism and what progressivism really is. And as I said, it's not liberalism. It's mind control. It's speech control. It's dissent control. It's danger. It's anti-American. It's anti-American traditions. But again, when I've given that speech, I've probably given it around 8 to 10 times now. I'll be going to Alabama. Actually, I gave that speech. Here's a good example. I gave that speech in Tennessee 2 weeks ago, and a lady was there from Alabama representing the Alabama GOP women's clubs, and she's now invited me down for a book signing and that speech in Alabama. So people do respond to it because, again, it's not your normal run-of-the-mill political speech.
Right.
It gets people thinking about why this election was so important, why Hillary Clinton and the left had to be stopped this time, but also how serious they are about manipulating the levers of power in order to do their thing, which, again, is to delegitimize thought on the right.
You know, this is like 1984 on Rhine. You know, it's pretty much like the Animal Farm type of thing, too.
Yes, very much so, very much so. One, again, I don't want to get into the whole speech, but something that really gets everyone's attention, I know got your attention, was this whole thing about diverting settlement money from the Wall Street banks to community activist groups. And,
yes.
Well, when lawyers are in the audience, I know their first thought is, "Oh, wait a second. When the federal government sues, the federal Justice Department sues somebody, it takes them to court, those dollars, those settlement dollars, have to go to the federal treasury. That's the law." But what these folks have come up with in the Obama Justice Department is quote-unquote voluntary contributions. They leverage from these banks, and when they do leverage these quote-unquote voluntary contributions, they give the banks 2 times credit concerning the bottom line on their settlement figure. So if it's a $100 million settlement, again, $10 million could be a voluntary contribution to Acorn. And they'll give them $20 million worth off the $100 million settlement figure. So it's a very, very interesting phenomenon, how they go about their business. And it's dangerous. Again, it's funding their allies on the left, and it's shutting down us on the right.
Well, you could
People need to understand how serious they really are.
Can you imagine if Mark Twain was around today, he'd be assassinated?
How about Winston Churchill?
Yeah.
I mean, he couldn't believe this stuff. And let me just go back for a second to the whole stuff going on campus, which I've written about extensively. And I really hope your listeners will take this to heart. I went to Princeton, and there's a good conservative group up there, but obviously a lot of the Ivy schools, but not just the Ivy schools.
And you went to Wake Forest too, right?
Are so darn left, and it's not just the faculty; it's the administrators starting and perpetuating this goofy concept of these speech codes and safe zones. You know, when Trump won, you had these cry zones and cookie days and lectures being postponed and finals being postponed. But alums need to stand in, because these are the same folks who come at you, whether you're a graduate from you name the school, it doesn't matter. People, they hit you up for money, right? Mm-hmm. And the alumni really need to stand up and say, wait a second, I'm happy to write a check to my school. It helped make me a success, but there's a line here. There's a line here, and people need to stand up.
Well, Governor, I agree. I couldn't agree more. But the situation in schools, whether it's public schools, I think we have to think about how we finance these public institutions and what they're putting out, what we're getting for our dollar. It's like the for-profit schools. Now they're bringing in all these J-1 visa teachers from places like Pakistan who teach Sharia law, and they're getting rid of the adjunct professors right here in the metro area.
It's really interesting how they have gone about their business. They're serious. They're committed. You see now, how ironic. In fact, I'm sitting here writing a piece for my Washington exam. I write for the Washington Examiner twice a month. How right after the election, all they wanted to do was delegitimize Electoral College. It was, we need to go to popular vote. This isn't fair. Blah blah blah. A couple of weeks that didn't work. So what do they do? A couple weeks later, they want to use the Electoral College to overturn the election. I mean, they're really nimble. I'll give them that. They're not very consistent, but they're nimble.
One guy in the USA Today said that the founders knew that one day we would have a Trump. That's why we need the Electoral College.
That's great.
It's amazing.
Those guys were pretty smart back then, I have to say.
You have to say, there's no way, Governor, these guys, they saw it, because you just get two states like New York and California, and it's over. Here it is, popular vote, and we take you down, and nobody has a say-so.
Well, I think that's a really great point. I think people need, if you ever do get into an argument with a lefty on, geez, this isn't fair, first of all, you give them a history lesson. But secondly, I'm sure Republican candidates would spend more time in California and New York and run up better numbers if we ever got to a popular vote. But that's not the campaign strategy that makes sense under the Electoral College. So, again, we don't exactly maximize our vote in those two large voting states.
Well, you did a great job. I remember when you were on the Hill, but I remember when you were governor, you had a really great outreach with the Secretary of Commerce for your state. I mean, it was
Ehrlich is the best.
Yeah.
Absolute the best.
And you had a big outreach with the minorities, the Asian Americans, the African Americans.
Very much.
And you did a hell of a job with
thank you.
With IT. I remember IT was just boom, 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 right? In Maryland, it was like passing the Dulles corridor. You were just sprouting all over the place. I hope that you're going to be active, even in consulting with the new administration, and they call upon people like you, seasoned people who understand business, and you continue to have dialogue with things that people don't understand, like the CPA.
Steve, thank you. I really appreciate it. This is a historic time, obviously, but everybody always says that every 4 years is a historic time. But this, maybe more so than not, because given the nature of how this progressive movement has evolved, we better be successful. We better have our act together. Paul Ryan and Donald Trump better get along. Bishop McConnell better understand what's going on here. We have to make good decisions with regard to judgeships in the Supreme Court. We have to get real tax reform passed. We have to pass an immigration bill. And we really need to do things that count here, because the American public has really fired the left. From state legislatures to town councils to the Congress to the President of the United States. Now it's on us to perform.
Well, Governor, I want to say one thing. I am a big supporter. I love MPT, and you know MPT, Maryland Public Television, is great. However, PBS in general, on a big scale, has to be reformed. Sure. If you're going to pay for this stuff, you can't have the Gwen Eiffels out there for 20 years. You got to have fair play. You know,
it's the same point I made about the colleges. College is about learning and being challenged intellectually and hearing different points of view and losing and winning, and yeah, sure, absolutely. We're not afraid. Here's the deal. On the right, we should never be afraid of competition. We should never be afraid of what they say. Mm-hmm. And today, at least, it appears we're not, but they certainly are.
We have 1 minute left, Governor. But I seriously want to see PBS reformed. If they're going to have 17 shows, then we have to split them.
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more.
And I think somewhere along the line, FCC, whatever, change the airwaves, whatever goes. I want to wish you, your lovely wife, your family, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Well, thank you, and I'll make a last pitch for my book. It's a great Christmas present, Turning Point. And we wish you Merry Christmas. And how fun is it to see the President of the United States-elect out there wishing everybody a Merry Christmas.
Isn't it great?
And a happy holiday.
I love it. Thank you, Governor Bob Ehrlich.
My pleasure.
Bye now.